Good morning and welcome. Buenos días y bienvenidos. Welcome to Los Cien's ninth annual State of the Latino Community Address. And now I want to invite Angelica Negron with the Santa Rosa Symphony Spotlight. And she's a composer with the Santa Rosa Symphony, and she'll be, her piece will be Me He Perdido. Is Angelica here? Oh, there you are. Come on up. Welcome.
I was looking for the little stool for short people. Buenos dias. Hi, everyone. My name is Angelica Negron. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much to Los Cien for having me, and to Hernan G. It's a pleasure to be amongst you. I spent a little time listening, and a lot of things also resonate with classical music. I'll share more about that in a second. But my name is Angelica. I'm a Puerto Rican composer, performer, and educator. I was born in the island, and I right now live in Brooklyn. And I'm here with the Santa Rosa Symphony. We have a really great concert over this weekend, and I'll tell you more about it. I'm doing a residency with them as part of the First Symphony project. Has anyone been to a symphony before? Wow, that's amazing. Great. That's really exciting. So I grew up in Puerto Rico. I grew up as a violinist. I never played anything by someone that was alive, so I didn't know I could be a composer. Just didn't see it. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep playing violin and be super distracted by the chord and the horns and the percussion and be fascinated by it, but I had no idea what that meant for me. I was really lost. And I was doing violin, but then I started being very curious about other instruments. I started teaching myself the accordion, learning cello, learning harp, and I thought I was the most unfocused violin student ever until I realized that what I wanted to do was to write for all the instruments. And that really changed my life. And I've been writing music ever since. It's been 22 years of me writing music. And I started it pretty late, actually, for composers, like when I was 20. You can do the math. And I'm really passionate also about education, because I feel like in music, and I'm sure some of you have this experience too, when you learn about music, it's through technique, through a right or wrong way of doing things, right? This is how you hold the violin, this is how you hold the bow, and no, it's not like that. And we never get to play with sounds or explore. When we are doing that in preschool with visual arts, it's very common, right? We all play with crayons, with colors and watercolors, and there's no right or wrong. It's very exploratory, but we never get to do that with sound. And I think even if you're not going to be a composer or a musician, but if it's such a really beautiful skill set to have that kind of sense of curiosity and how to follow that. And I've been working for about 12 years with a program in New York, with the New York Philharmonic called Very Young Composers, that mentors young students. My students are 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and they write pieces sometimes for the whole New York Philharmonic, which is pretty amazing. And I'm always and constantly inspired by the sounds that they make up in their head. And a lot of it's because they don't have all this baggage of like what classical music is supposed to sound like, which is what I struggle with every day when I'm about to write a piece, because I went to the conservatory and I'm definitely not a dead white man. So it's sometimes hard to be constantly in the spaces that they are historically occupying. So I've been very surprised by having a career as an orchestral composer. The piece that will be premiered with the Santa Rosa Symphony next year will be my 15th orchestral piece. I never in my life, thank you. I never ever in my life thought that would be possible. My first piece was with the Puerto Rico Symphony. They did a really amazing workshop for young composers, because it's really hard as a composer to have an orchestral piece performed. It's a lot of people, which means a lot of money and a lot of resources. and the arts are already in a really precarious state, especially in the island. But they did this initiative that was wonderful, and I got a recording out of that. And then from that, when I went to NYU for my master's, I won a competition for doing a residency with the NYU Symphony, and then from there I got another one, and then my first paid commission, and then I'm now on my 15th. But I say that because I still struggle when I'm writing a piece with finding my space, and because I'm mostly being programmed with Beethoven or Strauss. Those two keep coming up, and I'm like the little piece in the beginning, right? And the more I'm in those spaces, the more I think it's really important to kind of be unapologetic about who I am and not really carry the weight of tradition. Thank you. It can be sometimes really kind of heavy, but, and I've learned this actually by seeing my students interact with the orchestra, seeing those 10-year-olds in front of the New York Philharmonic, just like, yeah, it's like, no, not like that. Like, and I'm like, whoa, I wish I had that. So I've been trying my best to keep doing what is it that brought me here in the first place, which is being excited about music and exploring sounds. I love sounds from the environment, weird, unconventional sounds, and the piece that the Santa Rosa Symphony will be playing this weekend, it's called Me He Perdido, and it has some calderos and pots and pans from my kitchen that I sampled, and I bring them into the orchestra too. I'm really interested in putting those in conversation, not elevating pots and pans. They're already way up there for me. And I really don't like that word, elevating. I love putting those things in conversation. I love inviting my abuela and my mom into the concert hall too, and seeing what other things that can evoke in others when they listen. The piece is called Me He Perdido. It's a lot about the search for home, being in diaspora. I've been in New York now for 15 years. Most of my family and my friends are still in the island. Is anyone from Puerto Rico here? No hay boricuas. Una. Por allá. Yeah. So we're going to another difficult time, so please keep us close to your heart. We are resilient, but we also deserve better. So keep us in your hearts. Thank you. And I have just one. I'm trying to keep good track of time. Okay. I have 2 more minutes to talk to you. I'll before telling you more about the concert, I'll just really briefly say that I'm here as part of the First Symphony Project, which is a really exciting initiative from the Santa Rosa Symphony and in partnership with the Eugene Symphony. And I was asked to write my first symphony. And I've written a lot of orchestral music before. And symphony is kind of like it's I don't know, in classical music there are things that are unnecessarily complicated, but symphony is used to refer to the orchestra itself, right? So we have the Santa Rosa Symphony, but it's also a pretty specific musical form that was developed many years ago. So when I was commissioned to write my first symphony, I immediately just was like, what does that mean to me? Someone living in 2022, 4'11", Puerto Rican woman with purple hair. I don't know what that means. I'm still figuring it out. I'm almost done with the piece. I'm super excited about it. Basically, I can tell you the long story short is that it meant that it could be anything I wanted it to be because I'm in charge. So I hope that you come back for that in February next year. It'll be very exciting. And for this weekend, I want to personally invite you all to hear my work that I mentioned before, Me He Perdido. It's inspired by a poem by the Argentinian poet Oliverio Girondo, and a line that says, No estaba con mi sombra, me he perdido. I wasn't with my shadow, I've gotten lost. I adore his poetry. So come hear that this Saturday, Sunday, and Monday at the Green Music Center here, performed by your very own Santa Rosa Symphony, conducted by the amazing Francesco Lechechong. If you need more arm twisting, we are giving Los Cien members a coupon code for a special discount when you buy your tickets on the Santa Rosa Symphony website. So the code is LC15. Again, the code is LC for Los Cien 15, and that's 15% off altogether with no spaces. So if you buy your tickets by phone or in person, just mention Los Cien to the box office staff. And we're also leaving some flyers here today. I hope to see you there this weekend. And I'll be back also in about 5 months. I have to finish this piece with my first full symphony, Deep Breath, in March. And I hope to see you all again. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, we got to show our love for Angelica, and let's get out to the symphony and see her show. So it's time for our next panel discussion. This is on ARPA small business, and is really discussing, building beyond barriers. And you're going to hear how different organizations have come together through the magic of ARPA. So I'd like to invite Dr. Marlene Orozco. She's the CEO and founder of Stratified Insight Research Consulting, and was with Stanford University, and is actually partnered with Los Cien as our resident economist. So Dr. Orozco, please join us.
I get a step stool, all right. Buenos dias, good morning, everybody. Oh, come on. Buenos dias and good morning, everybody. There you go. Maybe we should, everybody stand, and we're just gonna do a quick stretch. Get that energy flowing. Everybody stand on up. Do a quick stretch. High five your neighbors if you're so inclined. Let's get that energy going. Great. All right, we can go ahead and take a seat. It is my pleasure to be here today. And the panel we're about to hear, I have an excellent panel lined up for you all, and it's all about building beyond barriers. Now, we heard this morning about it's been Oprah time, right? The American Rescue Plan Act disseminated $1.9 trillion in a stimulus bill. In Sonoma County, $34 million was received and allocated to communities. And so you're going to hear from ARPA recipients, again, American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, in just a bit, how they're transforming these dollars, this fusion of dollars, into action. Now, before we hear from this panel, as a researcher by training, I'm loving all the data that's been shared thus far, and I want to set the stage and contextualize for you all the state of entrepreneurship for the BIPOC community. Much of my research lies within the Latino community, and we've heard again this morning that Latinos are a fast-growing population. We became the largest ethnic group in California way back in 2014. The rest of the country is catching up. And so we are, as you know, a majority minority state. Of the 39 million people living here, 39% of those, or 15 million, over 15 million, are Latino. And so this is a powerful story of population growth. And with growth, hopefully there growth in numbers, there's also power. We need to see more of that. And an untold story is that of entrepreneurship. Latinos are actually starting businesses at a much faster rate than their population growth. And the BIPOC members of the community are also starting businesses at a faster rate than their white counterparts. And if we think about the most recent economic recession in 2008, there actually would have been fewer businesses in 2012 compared to 2007 if it were not for Latinos starting businesses. Now, yeah, that deserves a round of applause. And I want to note that this is an important bright spot because entrepreneurship is a building block of wealth in this country. A traditional pathway is home ownership. And we saw somebody struggle this morning talk about trying to buy a home. It's a challenge. Education is another building block of wealth. Entrepreneurship is another building block. And we oftentimes think about, if you were to close your eyes and think about an entrepreneur, a Latino, or a BIPOC business owner might not come to mind. In fact, if you Google the word entrepreneur, you'll get Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. My dream, my goal is that for one day when you Google entrepreneur, you see a member of the Latino community, you see somebody who is sitting in this room right now pop up in that Google search. Oftentimes, these businesses are described as necessity businesses, and they're deemed for failure or staying small. And in fact, throughout the pandemic, 2.9 million micro businesses, micro online businesses started. And so there's a sense that these might not last. And the reality is that necessity businesses can and do become opportunity businesses. We saw this throughout the pandemic within the Latino community. Entrepreneurs who were able to access pandemic relief aid through the over $800 million deployed by the Paycheck Protection Program, which then became forgivable grants, they were able to stay afloat, become innovative, generate new business products and services, and of course, transform their businesses to digital spaces. There's the story of Lorena, who had an empanada shop, and she, before the pandemic, her fastest growing revenue stream was conducting empanada making classes in her multiple shops. And she thought for a second that that revenue stream was going to close. But in fact, she transferred empanada making classes to Zoom, as many of us did, right? And that continued to be a revenue stream for her. And it also built community during a time of quite many challenges. So that's the story of our growth not just in population, but also in entrepreneurship. Now, of course, we're also here to talk about the tough times and the barriers. Certainly, we're experiencing, even for big businesses, right? We're in a bear market right now. And for small businesses, there's been challenges of not just the pandemic, but supply chain issues, inflation, ongoing climate change. My heart goes out to those in Puerto Rico and in Florida. Of course, we experience that here with ongoing wildfires, earthquakes, right? This is the terrain that small businesses must navigate. And so it's critical that there is this infrastructure built and ready to go to deploy not just relief aid, but sustained and institutionalized support and programming, which we'll hear in just a bit. And for members of the BIPOC business community, oftentimes these existential crises and times of challenge are compounded by legacies of discrimination. We oftentimes learn in history class about mortgage lending and redlining, how homes weren't sold to African Americans or Latinos, right? They were sectioned off, they were redlined. Similar practices happen in business lending. In fact, if a national bank, which is a traditional source of lending, were to look at two business applicants on paper, one Latino and one white, and they share the same revenue, same profitability, they're in the same industry, if you are Latino, your chances of getting approved for that national bank loan are 60% lower. That's holding all else equal. That's worse than flipping a coin. And so we, as architects of our own solutions, are starting to build businesses in the finance industry. You'll hear from Juan Hernandez in just a bit, who's doing just this. Again, we're also entrepreneurs in the media industry. You'll hear from Hector in just a bit. So I challenge us all to change our misconceptions, change our perceptions about who an entrepreneur is, because again, it is a pathway for wealth generation in this country. So the last thing I want to talk about is the role of relief aid. So the pandemic created a natural experiment, if you will, where there was this massive deployment of dollars to through stimulus packages, through the Paycheck Protection Program, through ARPA, Oprah time as it was called earlier. And we are here to show action. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about again is how these the organizations are deploying these ARPA funds. So with that in mind, I want to go ahead and welcome my three panelists to the stage. We have Juan Hernandez, who is the founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO of Crecel Capital Fund. And I'll have them introduce themselves in just a moment. We have Nicole Lim joining us. She's from the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. And we have Hector Velasquez, who's the CEO of Latinx Foundation's Small Business Education, president and CEO of Nexo Media. Welcome. Now, one more note about the role that capital and this infusion of money really plays in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Research actually found that when people receive their stimulus checks, right, as individuals, as consumers, that led to an increased spike in business registrations, right? So there's a world of opportunity that happens when you have capital available. So what I'd like to do now is I'd love to start with my panel here and have a brief round of intros. They're going to share a little bit about themselves and their organization's story. And then we're going to get into the meat of this ARPA funding and what they did to obtain it and how they're going to leverage it. So we'll start here with Hector. Go ahead, Hector.
Yay, the butterflies. Hello, everyone. You know, the Red Latinx, the hub, red in Spanish means network, started around the pandemic, mainly because we saw opportunity about many small businesses not having the right access or the same access as everybody else. And they would come into the hub, and 2 out of 10 had the proper documentation or the proper structure, business structure, in order to access funds. So it was heartbreaking to turn away 8 of those folks because they had no accounting, no paperwork, everything was written in a book. So heartbreaking to see some of these close. And when we saw, you know, I'm in marketing as stated, and when we saw the opportunities, I actually got here in Sonoma County in 2003. And I said, all we have to do is just communicate, and it's done. It's a done deal. And here we are still dealing with the same thing. So I want you to remember these names. It's a brief story that I share. Chente, Vicente, and Vince. Just remember these. Chente, Vicente, and Vince. If you're Latino and I'm from Guadalajara, if you are told a slang name down there, that means you're welcome. You're part of the family. If they're calling you by your name next time you go over there, I should question that. So Chente, right? Chente, he's early 20s, and he hears about the U.S., wants to immigrate, comes and wants to just live the American dream. And he lands here in the U.S., and he's here for, you know, a brief time. He wants to go back home. He doesn't care where he sleeps. He doesn't care if it's in a closet, in his car. It doesn't matter. All that Chente wants to do is send money back home. That's all he wants to do. He doesn't plan to stay here. He just wants to build a home and go back home, right? 10 years go by, right? And now he's given the opportunity to become a resident. Chente now becomes Vicente. Now Vicente is divided. He's brokenhearted. He loves the opportunity the U.S. gave him, but he's looking back home and he's just divided, absolutely divided. He has kids now, right? And he looks at the Chentes of the world and he says, boy, I was there once, you know, and Chente, don't work too hard. Just slow down there for a little bit. 20 years go by, and now Vicente becomes Vince. And I know there's some Vinces here, so no offense to you. It's just me. So now Vince, he's more acculturated. He understands what America mainstream looks like, and his circle of friends, right, are completely different. They're the majority are non-Latino, or they're more diverse, right? But when you look at the Vicentes of the world, you see more of the circle that the folks, and this can apply to any type of nationality. And I'm using these names because I'm from Mexico, but apply these to anybody. The funny thing is that when Vince wants to hire some work, guess who he goes to? He goes to the Chentes, right? Cheap labor, get this guy over here, right? Now, the sad thing is that when Vicente and Chente go in to access funding or access any type of opportunity, they all get looked at the same. And that's the sad part. right? That's the area of opportunity that I think that, thank you to Los Cien to put this together and allow me to share this little story. We shed some light into that, right? Now, Vince will eventually become mainstream America, and this is the thing. Mainstream America, when they want to actually reach the Latino market, who do they go to? They go to the Vinces of the world, right? And why do they go to the Vinces of the world? Because they're more acculturated, they connect. But how can we reach the Vicentes and the Chentes? And this is why we created the Latinx Hub, because we want to make sure that we serve every single individual that has this opportunity to start a business, right? To have access to capital, to have access to all the wonderful things that America has to offer. And this is how we built why we built the hub. And anyway, thank you for the opportunity. And pass it on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikki Lim. I'm the director of the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. I'm Pomo and Miwok. Mendocino Lake in Sonoma County is my family's ancestral territory. We've been here since time immemorial, which means ever since anyone could remember. The museum's also been here a long time. We've been here since, we've been in San Francisco since 1996. We moved to Santa Rosa in 2001. And I had fully planned to follow my father's insistent request, twisting my arm, that I go to law school. Didn't necessarily want to go to law school, but he said I didn't have anything else to do, so I went to law school. And I had fully planned to go into our family's nonprofit legal business. But when I was in law school, I was reading cases, constitutional law, and looking at how cases on religious freedom were decided. And I really learned that, there's a lot of racial and historical bias, and that judges bring that to the table. And so when I started working at the museum, I really felt that I could do a lot more to change the minds of the classroom before they got to the courtroom. And so I've dedicated my career towards the work of the museum, which is educating the public about California Indian history and culture from a Native perspective. And it's really leading with Native voices. We are focused on, our objects are beautiful, our baskets are beautiful. They're symbols of our cultural heritage, but it's our people that breathe life into them and give them meaning and stories. And so our museum is really focused on the living, focused on the younger generation, teaching them cultural knowledge, connecting them to their ancestral territory, letting them define, who a Native American is in the future. And so a lot of our work is around oral history, food sovereignty, education reform, language revitalization. So we do a lot of different types of things, but we always welcome you. We're just up in Larkfield off of Airport Drive, and would love to have you visit. We're often told nobody knows we're there. Sometimes that's for a reason, and so we can get all that work done. But look forward to sharing our programming with you today. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be back live with people, looking them in the face. The whole Zoom thing, right? I totally lost my influence on people over Zoom. So happy to be back live with people. My name is Juan Hernandez. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crecer Capital Fund. We are an investment lending organization here in Sonoma County. We believe that the greatest opportunity Sonoma County has for prosperity is investing in the Latino community and in Latino small businesses. Sonoma County, all these stats are being thrown out, but let me just give you the one that really is the one that drives us. Right now, Latinos are about 1 of every 3 people in Sonoma County. Yet, we have 1/8 of the wealth of Sonoma County. We are projected to be 2 of every 3 people by the year 2060. Now the question is, are we still gonna have 1/8 of the wealth when 2 of every 3 people are Latino? That's that nut that we're trying to crack. That's the challenge that's in front of us. We are a part of that solution. We know we're not the only solution, but entrepreneurship is a pathway for our mobility. And so that's who we are. That's what Crecer Capital Fund is. We were launched at the beginning of 2021. We're currently applying to become a CDFI, which stands for a Community Development Financial Institution. And what that is a certification from the U.S. Treasury Department as a trusted lender in the community. We will, in fact, today we will hit submit on our application. Everybody keep your fingers crossed. We're really excited because if we're able to get that certification, Crecer Capital will be an institution that will be in Sonoma County for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Thank you.
And that's really a big step, Juan. CDFIs were really critical throughout the course of the pandemic. Again, they built the relationships prior, the infrastructure prior to the pandemic to be able to deploy capital. So we'll light a candle for you, Juan, and we'll light a candle for Vicente and all of the other Chentes and Vinces. So now that you've met the panel, I want to welcome everybody to, if you have questions, to write them down. You have index cards on your table. We welcome questions in Spanish. We welcome questions in English or in any other language, and hopefully we'll have them translated. But now I want to get to the ARPA process. Now, last year, I was commissioned to make a data-driven case by the Economic Board of Development. And this was through an equity lens. And shout out to Sheba, who really led this effort. And I made the case with the County Board of Supervisors about how to allocate those funds. And of course, my shtick is all about entrepreneurship, so I made the case for entrepreneurship. And I informed them that if Latinos in Sonoma County were funded on par to their white business counterparts, there would be an additional $1.3 billion in revenue available in Sonoma County. And so this presents an immense opportunity. And what I'd like to hear now from is the stories from the panelists. Tell us about your ARPA process. I know there was a lot of coalition building, a lot of thought really put into how to lay the groundwork for sustained and institutionalized structures. So we'll start with Juan.
So the ARPA process, before I start with the ARPA process, just know that my work and collaborations in Sonoma County go back to 2012, right when I was the executive director of La Luz. There was a big push in the community around the Portrait of Sonoma back then, 2012, 13, I think 14. That first collaboration was my introduction into understanding how Sonoma County works, who are the players. And so my understanding of who the people are in the community go back since 2012. Obviously, a lot of things have changed. My work with La Luz during the 2017 fires also gave me some insight of how to access funds that are coming down on emergency, how to collaborate with others, or where the funding's at. The fires of 2019 also offered another opportunity to deepen relationships with people I already had in the community as executive director of La Luz. So I just want to kind of pretext that with a lot of the relationships that were formed were already deepened, and I think that was a big thing as we went into this ARPA funding. When Crecer launched, we knew that we wanted to focus on the lending product, which is a microloan program between $1,000 and $50,000, and we knew that we needed support around technical assistance. I met with Sheba, and I said, look, is there any way we could partner up on the ARPA funds? And she was the first person that said, yes, when the guidelines come out, we're going to partner. EDB is going to be with Crecer, because she understood the value of having a CDFI in the community. Soon after Sheba left, I met with Ethan. I called Ethan. I said, hey, is EDB still on board? Do you guys still want to partner with us with this ARPA funding? And Ethan said, yes, let's meet. And so the conversation started with Ethan Brown, I think at the Economic Development Board. I think the next day or that same day, I had a meeting with Hector. I understood he was starting the Latinx Hub, and so I knew that I needed that technical support. I met with Hector, and Hector's like, we should partner up. And I said, we should. Ethan, I'm partnering up with Ethan. And so him and Ethan already had a conversation that Ethan was going to come visit the Latinx Hub, I believe. Pretty soon, I think Peter Rumble reached out and said, hey, there's this art, maybe there's an opportunity. I know he wanted to work with the Chamber of Commerce's. And I say, hey, I just talked to Ethan, I just talked to Hector, let's meet. Right around that time, I think Ronit came through from Sonoma County Legal Aid. She said, hey, we have an opportunity, legal aid, and trying to support small businesses. I said, hey, we're gonna have a meeting next week. Jump on that meeting. I think the next hour I had a meeting with Herman Hernandez, Papa Herman Hernandez, and he's like, hey, what's going on with this funding? And I'm saying, hey, we're putting a collaboration together. We already have these 4 or 5 people. And he said, okay, let's do this. And Hector had talked to the Hardship Fund, and the Hardship Fund was talking to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and we said we should just all get together and figure this out and unite and apply together as a collaboration for the ARPA funding. And we did. I think Peter was able to round up the Chamber of Commerce, Ethan Brown, Latinx Hub, SBDC, Peter came in. And the idea was to build a funnel of outreach to the community around small business and entrepreneurship that would then lead to educational opportunities with the Latinx Hub, EDB, SBDC, and legal aid, and then they would make a funnel towards capital for Latino community in Crecer Capital. And that's how that collaboration came together.
Yeah. And I'll add that to Juan, and I think everything happened so quickly, but I think quickly because we were all prepared for this opportunity. I think that what we had seen, we had a great opportunity, and I think one of the best things is that we also included the Black Chamber of Commerce. I think that they're the Asian, so we really went out and about to make it very, very inclusive. And it was just exciting to begin how the county itself developed a committee. I was fortunate to be part of that committee and the whole infrastructure, and then to be awarded funding. We didn't expect it. We're so young, but the experience, our co-founders, Hugo Mata, which I think he's in the building, along with Mariana, and Gustavo Sanchez, just itself, we just had that synergy that we have this opportunity to create a pathway, like Juan was stating, into the workshops to make sure that these folks had the right documentation, that before we got them loan ready, that we got them prepped to access any of the resources that were out there. But the most exciting thing is just how so many organizations from a diverse background got together to bring and to collaborate to something like this. And there's been a lot of work the last several months to start working on this. We're also excited, but just the feeling overall and being in Sonoma County again since 2003 to see something like this has just been extraordinary. And Peter Rumble taking the lead. Thank you, Peter, for doing all that you do with that. I mean, it's just been short of amazing.
I do want to add another piece that I think that as we started collaborating and uniting through the community side, the table was set to receive us. And this is all the work that Alegría has been doing, all the work that Oscar Chavez has been doing on the county side in terms of they were ready to receive this type of collaboration, where in the past it was a little bit more difficult for organizations like ours, especially startup organizations, to receive that level of funding. We usually, small organizations in Sonoma County, from my experience, usually lose out to other organizations that have a development director, development associate, development intern, a social media person, a helper, and 5 interns, right? Those are the ones that are able to write the grant, go speak in front of the supervisors, go meet one-on-one with the funders, and get those bigger grants. And I think this time the script was flipped, and we were able to get funding to people that would have never gotten funding or even looked at in the past.
So Indians and federal funds go way back. We've been dealing with federal funding for a long time. And because of that, we have, capacity to do federal funds, which a lot of newer Native organizations don't have that history. So I think it's very difficult. We've had everything from funding from the Centers for Disease Control to right now we have an economic development funding. So we've done a wide range, and we actually very consciously a few administrations ago decided to work towards more private foundation funding because we were really tired of having to ride the wave and the trends of funds and wanted more stability in our organization. But our ARPA project really dates back to 2017. Our museum is in Larkfield, and we weren't sure if it was still there for a few days. And when we did get access, many of the neighbors in the surrounding areas were in our parking lot, and we just started doing direct services because people needed help. And through the successive fires and the pandemic, we realized that our tribal community was not getting an equitable distribution of resources. And being around, having been around a long time and being a trusted community organization, they were coming to us. And so we really started working on getting cash assistance. We started doing weekly food box distributions, working with 9 tribal farmers in the Bay Area. We started distributing assistance to elders. Our tribal youth started gathering teas and making traditional medicines that promoted respiratory health. And so it's, our ARPA project kind of is an umbrella for a lot of different issues in our community. It's about food sovereignty. And food sovereignty for us was really prioritized after the fires by our tribal community as a means of climate change mitigation. That if we're out regularly working and having a consistent relationship with our ancestral territory and stewarding it in the way that we apply traditional ecological knowledge, it prevents a lot of the disasters that we've been experiencing. The ban on traditional burning and fire ecology for 100 years definitely contributed to the disasters that we've experienced. And so our project is around cultivating traditional food producers and creating a marketplace for them to be able to provide traditional foods, not only to our community, but to our local community. And that's really key, not only in terms of environmental stewardship, but also in the health of our Native people. We have so much dietary related disease, chronic disease in our community, and it's directly related to the food that we eat. Many people love fry bread, and I love it once a year, but that's not Indian food. That's colonizer food that was made from the rations that were given to us by the government, and we did some good stuff with it. But we have to get back to our acorn, our manzanita, our salmon, all of those things that are nutritious and going to nurture us and that are part of our DNA. And so our ARPA project, while it serves the purpose of creating food vendors, it serves a bigger purpose on reestablishing our relationship to our ancestral territory, connecting, and working to improve the health of our tribal community. So.
And we're receiving lots of questions from the audience, so thank you. Keep those coming. For my next question, I want to start actually by sharing a personal story. So when I was at Stanford, first-generation college kid to go to college, parents are immigrants from Jalisco, Mexico, with a 6th grade education. Now I have a PhD, sharing that so you can see what's possible. But thank you. When I was at Stanford, I participated in a retreat with leaders from the community centers. At Stanford, we have ethnic community centers. I was one of the leaders of El Centro Chicano y Latino. We had the Black Community Services Center, the Asian American Activities Center, and the Native American Cultural Center. So we were all together on this weekend retreat. And one of the activities, each of the leaders, there was about 6 of us, were given plates. We each had 1 plate. Plus 1 more. And our goal was to leverage those plates and get across to the other line. Now, we couldn't touch the ground. We could only use those plates. And we were told that the team that got across would get Jamba Juice gift cards. So here comes in my competitive spirit and that of my peers. And you saw all kinds of things, acrobatics and cartwheels, trying to use these plates to get across. And we certainly didn't have enough. Didn't matter how much we stretched, there were people trying to go over each other's backs and leapfrog to get to the other side. This went on for about 30 minutes until, and I can't take credit for this, but there was somebody from the Native American Cultural Center who started looking around and went over to one of the other teams, and they had their plates in their hand, and the other team had their plates in their hand, all ripped and frustrated at this point. And we all started to look, and that's when it clicked. We came together, quite literally, and put our plates together to get across to the other side. And we walked seamlessly through. We built this path. You can think about the plates as a symbolism for resources. We built this path, and we all walked across. So this question is for the group about how we can build those bridges and systems and structures and work with each other in a respectful manner. We had one of the questions specifically directed to Nikki. Can you share your thoughts on how folks of the broader BIPOC communities can work respectfully with Native American and Indigenous people and organizations? How can we build those bridges, share resources, and institutionalize these structures?
Thank you. We get lots of requests, and it's important, I think, to realize that for Native people, we know that other groups don't know a lot about our history, and that's for a reason. I mean, the last stage of genocide is denial, and as we continue to not educate the public about the true history of the state, we perpetuate it. And it's sometimes a little bit, you get a little bit of burnout when you're continually asked to partner, but you have to bring the partner up to speed and educate them. And so I think it's really important to learn about the other groups and learn how you can best support them. And sometimes that's, giving Native people the space to lead. We have about 20,000 tribal people among the 24 tribes in the Tri-County region. But that's very small. California has the largest number of Native Americans of any state, but California Indians are a small percentage of that. We're outnumbered on many levels. And so I really think that it's important to think about partnership, listen to the partners. There's a lot legally required of consultation. A lot of legislation is passed and it just adds "and tribes." And so you end up with situations where there's funding available, but tribes don't qualify for it because of the definitions were not created in a way that they were consulted or heard. And so I think it's really important that we work together, but we're not tokenized. We share communities, and many of us are not just tribal, we're many other things, right? And unfortunately, the way that the census is structured, which is inherently underfunded in tribal communities, if you mark anything other than American Indian, you're not counted. So for us who are multiple things, if we mark that, we're not counted as Native people. So there's a lot that contributes to erasure. Often when I get invited to diversity, equity, inclusion boards, I ask, well, how are you counting your Native American people? And they said, well, we use the federal definition. Well, the federal definition is based on a colonial definition of blood quantum that's meant to erase us, not for Indian. The federal government never assumed Indians would still be here or have economic success in 2022. Their goal was to get rid of them. So I think it's really important that we're not tokenized, and we're invited to do blessings, to offer prayers, and that's wonderful. That's a very important part of our value system. However, we don't get invitations beyond that into the boardroom. And we need to be in the boardroom. We need to be making decisions that impact our ancestral territory and our communities. Thank you.
Recently, I was in a Zoom meeting, and it was a working group. I forgot specifically what it was, but one of the questions that the group, the small chat room we're tasked with is to answer the question, why is the African American community not doing well in school? I think something to that effect. And the strategy started flying. They were really good strategies, right? Feeding them. They need, some social services. And I think we were starting drilling down. I was getting excited. I was like, yeah, those are really good strategies, really good ideas. And there was about maybe 12, 15 people in this chat room, and there was not one African American in that chat room. Great ideas, great, which we assume, all with data, right? This is what the data says. And no African American was in the room. So I think that making decisions, planning, and strategy without the people that are going to be affected you cannot move forward with the plan unless the people who are being affected are in the room as well. It goes back to Ms. Lynn was saying, and I think what Crecer Capital is that a lot of conversations happening around economic development, around economic inclusion, financial security, investment in small businesses, and small businesses or economic institutions, like I said, are not at the table. And so we're part of that solution.
May I add just something really quickly in light of Hispanic Heritage Month that personally, an organization that I've been working with for the last 3 years, they have been so inclusive in making sure the Latino community gets access and resources. And I want to give it to Sonoma Clean Power, who's been amazing. Believe it or not, they funded a telenovela to educate folks that hopefully it's going to be coming out later on this year. But thank you, Sonoma Clean Power, for that. That's culturally approaching the Latino community.
So the cue cards tell me that we've run out of time, but I do want to do one final round robin, everybody on the panel to share any words of inspiration or messages. We also have a request from the audience. If you can share a message in Spanish, if you're so inclined, that would be welcome. Juan, in your message, if you can address whether Crecer works with the undocumented community and you do work with small businesses in Napa, you can answer in your message. Pero este mensaje es para todos los que pidieron en español. Ellos son los líderes de ustedes. Frecuentemente no se miran en el podio, están atrás de las cortinas haciendo el trabajo duro, pero ellos están aquí para ustedes. Entonces espero que tomen tiempo después de este evento para platicar con los líderes que ha escuchado, no tan solamente en este panel, pero en los demás también. So I'll hand it over to everybody to have a message.
So I want to answer the questions real quick. So if for Crecer, you can open up a bank account with an I-10. And if you can open up a bank account, you're eligible for a La Luz, Crecer Capital loan. I still have my La Luz. So fresh. The other thing too, I just want to make sure that the impact of the ARPA, especially around, is you guys understand what the impact is, because for me it's big. So we have a hardship fund led by Sally Lopez. They receive funds to do small business grants to small businesses that need $400, $500 to pay the electrical bill. That's the level of impact that ARPA funding got. She received a good amount. Go talk to Sally. She's over there. She'll let you know how to access that. The other thing that we got is our Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. If I'm not mistaken, for 41 years have been operating in Sonoma County without an executive director, all volunteer. What this ARPA does is seed funds for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to hire their first executive director after 41 years in Sonoma County. We do have the SBDC, and the work that Luis and Peter are doing are strong, but also the recognition that we needed to have a Latino-focused educational program. And so the ARPA funds seeded Latinx Hub, which will be expanding services in Spanish for the Latino small businesses in Sonoma County. And lastly, obviously, Crecer, launching and seeding a future CDFI for the community. That impact, along with that partnership, will be riding into the future. So I just want to make sure I pointed that out.
My dad founded our museum back in 1996. I lost him in 2020, so kind of hard to talk about it. Big shoes to fill. But he's the one that twisted my arm and made me go to law school, and I didn't understand why at the time. But he was someone who grew up on reservation up in Ukiah, didn't have much, was sent on relocation, worked as a police officer. I think he was the first California Indian highway patrolman. But he was very traumatized by a lot of the work that he did as a policeman. And he also saw injustice. And he decided to become a lawyer. When I was born in 1973, he graduated from law school. And so every time I complained about law school, he said, well, try having 8 mouths to feed, because I'm the youngest of 8. So I never got too far on complaints with him. But he taught me that you know, education is self-determination, and that no matter what happens to you in your life, you have your education, and you can always succeed, you can always achieve, you can always go further, you can pick yourself up and move on. And so I've tried to instill that in my children and the young Native community, which with ARPA funds, I think we have 10 POMO, young people under 30, 10 POMO people working for us now at the museum. So I really think it's about education and innovation and you know, looking at our future. And I'm very inspired by the work that our young people do on food sovereignty and policy work and ancestral gathering rights. And I'm just very inspired and optimistic to see what they will create. And so with education as our foundation, I think we can go really far. So thank you.
And I've been getting flashcards from this guy to stop. But really quick, you know, the time right now to open up a business for small businesses in our BIPOC community is now. There's so many resources. We got this funding that's incredible. So if you are thinking about opening up a business, the time is definitely now. En español, para todos aquellos que quieran abrir su negocio, el tiempo es ahora. No tienen que esperar. Hay suficientes fondos para todos, para que los guíen. Hay muchos talleres que se vienen. Así es de que estén alertas para todo eso. Chamber of Commerce, Alma Magallén, you've done incredible work around the pandemic, so thank you so much for that. But yes, the time is now, and thank you. Most importantly, thank you for Los Cien for giving us this platform to do that. Herman and team, you guys are wonderful, and thank you so much for this platform.
Thank you, Herman.
Thank you to Hector, to Nikki, to Juan. A round of applause. Thank you. These are your leaders.